Hey everyone, this is an introduction to the 1958 City Directory project that we're doing at the Community Mapping Lab here at the University of Georgia. This is a project that's taking this directory, which was kind of like white pages and yellow pages, like a phone book, but also kind of like a census. It was compiled by a private company that went house to house and asked people a variety of questions around where they work, if they own their home or not. They did a racial classification. They asked who else lived in that house, things like that. We're taking this scanned PDF that's held by the university libraries and digitizing it so that it's available to folks who are seeking to understand this era of Athens history. The goals of this project are, one, just to make that data more publicly accessible. So a scanned PDF can technically be public, but it's quite difficult to wade through that and find the information that you want. And so by digitizing it and putting it into a spreadsheet, we can do a lot more both to kind of access that data and take a look at it. For instance, who lived on a given street is a lot easier question to answer with a spreadsheet than having to page through and find all the places where that street is mentioned, right? And so it makes it just more publicly accessible and usable for folks who might have questions about what was going on during this time frame. In particular, our goal with this project at Community Mapping Lab is to have a better understanding of Black Athens at the end of the Jim Crow era. UGA desegregated in 1961. We have a lot of changes going on. The public schools didn't desegregate until the early 70s, but there's a lot of changes going on in the city, and this is understanding kind of what that segregated economy looked like across space, both in terms of where people lived, but also things like where they worked, right? And there's places like Hot Corner, which was the center of the Black business district downtown, that this will provide more detailed information on what businesses were there. Because like I said, this directory isn't just a white pages, it's a yellow pages. It has the businesses listed there. And so that's, I think, really helpful. And in general, we can better map out and understand the social geographies of the city with these data. Things like the footprint of UGA, the labor force, I think specifically finding out who worked where and for whom is something this directory really contributes to. And so I think it's a really interesting project to all contribute together on. Plus, it's a project we can all work on together. And I appreciate your watching this video and being part of this effort. I won't say a lot about the scholarly background of this. There's efforts going back to the 1800s. W.B. Du Bois's Philadelphia Negro did a similar kind of project where he went house to house and kind of asked people similar kinds of questions as what are in this directory. More recently, this Mapping Prejudice project at University of Minnesota is a project I really like. That's looking at the history of racial restrictive covenants, who you could sell your house to in terms of their race in Minnesota. That's had a very crowdsourced kind of vibe to it. And you can look up both of those projects if you're more interested. So the goals here, the main goal at this point is that we are cleaning these digitized records. So we've got a PDF, we have scanned it, we've done some automated reading of that and trying to separate it out into spreadsheet fields. But now we're trying to make sure that that looks all correct. And there's about 16,000 records, so it's a lot of reading to do. So we're crowdsourcing that work. As we're going, we're kind of iteratively, repeatedly going back and trying to geocode these records to tie them to specific locations, identify exactly where these houses were based on their address. And then we can start doing some mapping and understanding kind of what are the spatial patterns that we're seeing at this time, answer some of the questions that we've got, and we'll end up with a data set that's publicly shareable. So let's talk about this process a little bit. And to do that, I'm going to switch over to the Community Mapping Lab website. If you go to the main page, communitymappinglab.org, you'll find a link to the 1958 City Directory project, which gives some updates. Here's where we are at as I record this today. You can download a PDF of the whole directory, which looks a little bit like this. We'll talk more about that in a second. And then this page here is the really important one for your purposes, which is where you can sign up to do a page. And it looks something like this. All right. So you'll notice here that there's a page sign out. There's about 300 pages in this directory. And we've done a pretty good job. We're about 50% of the way done. You see a lot of these pages have been looked at already. And you can see a lot of them are marked as complete. Right. But there's a lot once we get down to the 200s that are still having time to go. One of the things we've done more recently in this project is group these pages together. So for instance, group 1 is pages 4 through 6, group 2 is pages 7 through 10, etc. And that both allows us to break these files into smaller files because editing one Google spreadsheet at once gets a little cumbersome. So we can have separate files for each group. And then it also allows for a little bit more teamwork, like you're working together with just a smaller group of people on one particular section of this directory. And so as you're going, I'd encourage you to think about maybe doing this together with some other people that you know. So how does this work? So let's say I wanted to start a new group. I'm going to be in group 46, and I would take page, which is starting with page 183. And I could put my name in there if I wanted to. I'll go ahead and do that for right now. Page 183, right? There's directions up here that kind of walk through this. We've got a list of variables here. I'm just pointing out that this is still on this page. To get to that page 183, which is in group 46, I click on this little link to files right up here. It's going to take me to a folder that's got a bunch of spreadsheets in it. And it was group 46, I believe. So I find group 46 down here. Address is group 46. I click on that. It will open up. It'll take a second because Google's got to think about how to open this Excel document. So give it just one moment. This is the exciting part. Okay, so now we have page 183 right here, and these are the individual listings. And I'll talk more about these listings in a second. But there's a number of variables here that we're checking. And again, this has been read in automatically and split apart a little bit. If you want to know what these variables are, you can go back to this spreadsheet, and they are described right down here, right, what those are. So your job is going to be to take that page, and you can either look at it on a screen with that PDF or print out a copy of that page and verify that all this information looks correct. And as you go, once you get done with one record, you'll say yes, 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 as you go through and say this was checked. And that's how we'll know kind of how the completion rate is working. Right? And then when you're done with the whole page, you can go back here and mark the whole page as complete. Right? So like Summer has done that here on page 45. So I'm going to go ahead and remove my name right now because I'm not working on this page. Currently, someone else can have it. So let's talk about how we're going to look at these pages. Let me make this big again. Here we go. So like I said, this is something that we digitized from a spreadsheet or from a PDF. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, and I'm going to make myself invisible here. So let's talk about how you read these entries. So you'll have a page that looks something like this, and these are all the variables that we're looking for. So the first thing that we pay attention to is the name. And you'll see the names listed here. Almost always, if it's a household with a family or married couple, you'll have the man listed first and the woman listed in parentheses, right? So sometimes there'll be businesses or organizations like Masonic Temple. For our purposes, that still goes in the name field, even though it's not a person, it's an organization. The second thing you'll have is the number of dependents. So this is the number of folks under 18 who are living in that house, and it's often just showing up as a number. That's something you want to make sure you add into the spreadsheet. And then you've got this page right here. Oops, this spreadsheet is not cooperating. So we've got these markers right here. It's green circled H's, and that means that the people living in that house are homeowners. If it's not there, that means they are not homeowners. I'm assuming it means they are renters, but they're not homeowners. So it's a 1 in the spreadsheet if that's yes, and a 0 if it's not present there. Like for the Martins, there's no circle H. Race is also listed here with a circle C, which means colored, and there's a separate dummy variable, a 1-0 variable in the spreadsheet for you to mark that with, if the household or the business is marked as colored. The blue is for occupation, or sometimes it will say student. So for instance, you can see Warren Martin, I'm assuming was an engineer. You just put in ENG. You only put in what's in the spreadsheet. You don't put anything you don't try to be smart and fill that out. Wilder Martin was an attendant, so ATNDT is what you would put into the occupation field, and you'll see how that works. Sometimes it'll say student, and there's a separate 1-0 for student as well that you can mark down. Next up, and again, I don't know why it's doing a bunch of these at once, but we've got place of business. So this is where they worked. So he was an engineer, supposedly, at Westinghouse Electric Corporation. Wesley Martin doesn't give what he did, but it does say that he worked at W.J. Martin. No, actually, this is saying he owned that business. But you could still say he worked at that business. I think that's what the implication here, because Wesley J. Martin would be W.J. Martin Oil Company. Here we've got Wilder Martin was an attendant at the Hensley service station. right? So that place of business is a separate column. Householder, this pink here, is this little h, and that just means that they are the head of household, essentially, is what that means. They were the person who is in charge of that household. If it's an R, it means resident. We're not fully sure yet exactly kind of what the distinction is here. Sometimes you'll have both a husband and wife listed separately. The wife will be an R and the husband will be an H. But it has to do with kind of household relationships, I think, something like that. So there's a separate column where you either put H or R. The home address is almost always listed at the end or toward the end. So Winterville, sometimes it's just a city, and you just put down the city. 390 Carroll Avenue, and you put the 390, the house number, separate from the street, and you'll see that in the spreadsheet. And then a phone number for a few of them. Not very many people have phone numbers, but you can stick it in there. So these are kind of complicated to look through. Sometimes the information's there, sometimes it's not. I'd encourage you to post questions, make comments, email your group members if you have questions about this. I don't know why this is happening right now. There we go. And that's about it. So, this is out of order. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to send you off here and stop this recording. But thanks so much again for your interest in this project, and I am really excited. I'm really excited for where this is going to go and what we can make with this spreadsheet.